today's show we're going to talk about Critical Paintball. And I've been a fan of Critical Paintballs for years, okay? John Paul Fortunati, to me, is a god of paintball, okay? I know he puts his pants on, you know, one leg at a time, just like the rest of us, but except when his pants are on, he builds some of the best fucking triggers in paintball, okay? I love Critical Paintball shit. They've built stuff for years that I've used. As a matter of fact, if you go back and look at the rendition aliases, those guns had critical ASAs on them, and they also had the Empire trigger guards on them. The reason why they had the Empire trigger guards on them was a lot of my players were using critical triggers on the rendition aliases, and we liked the way the that trigger guard gave us a little bit more room for the critical trigger. So when you see the rendition aliases with the Empire trigger guards, that was for Critical Paintball's trigger. I mean, he makes amazing stuff, amazing stuff. He makes triggers for Intimidators, the DM4s, the Protos, the Evil Pimp, the Ion, PM6, any of the ultralight frames, the Ego, even the Spider MG, Proto Rail and SLG, NXT Shocker, which is what we're going to install here. He makes them for the Mark, the Ego 7 and 8, the Angel, Bison Protege, FEP Quest. He makes triggers for all the guns that are out there. And if there's a new gun that comes out and you think you should make triggers for that one, send him an email. sales@criticalpaintball.com. He'll probably make one for you. So, I mean, he makes it for all, you know, every single gun that's out there. I mean, even the Evil Pimp. Who the hell made an aftermarket trigger for the Evil Pimp? Critical Paintball did. You got to understand his... you got to understand where Critical Paintball comes from for you to understand why their triggers are so badass, okay? John Paul Fortunati, Critical Paintball, I believe they play Division II NPPL. NPPL is a semi-auto league. So people that are playing in the NPPL, playing semi-auto, are looking for the best triggers that are out there. John Paul's out there playing just like the rest of the shitheads. He is out there balling it up in the NPPL and semi-auto. That kind of pedigree, that kind of research and on-the-field experience is why his triggers are absolutely amazing, because the designer, the owner of the company, is actually out there on the field playing, and he spares no expense. And I know that his triggers a lot of times are going to seem a little bit more expensive than some of the other companies that are out there, but you got to understand that most of the time with his trigger kits, not only are you getting a magnet trigger kit, which is in itself is worth between $10 to $20, but something that he does with his bearings, which is very interesting, he spares no expense with the bearings that he puts into his triggers. He does what's called, he purchases the bearings that are the precision instrument bearings with extended inners, okay? What that means is his triggers, in many cases, do not rub against the frame. The ball bearing, the inner sleeve of the ball bearing sticks out like 1/5 of a millimeter, just enough to keep the trigger away from the frame of the gun so that when you're walking your trigger, it doesn't rub. Something else he does with his bearings, I remember having this conversation with him a few years ago, is that he takes his precision bearings, which are extremely expensive, even a wholesale, they're extremely expensive. If you want to buy 1,000 of them, what he does is he takes the bearings and he actually cleans out the factory lubricant that comes on it and puts his own microfiltered synthetic oil in it. So, you know, I mean, that's just like true commitment to insane trigger speed. And what we're going to do today is a lot of people know, I mean, the Smart Parts guns have been plagued with horrible triggers throughout the years, and the Shocker by far is one of the worst. I have the critical trigger, which I've actually had in the gun, but I took it out for the show. I had the critical trigger for the Shocker, and I'm going to show you how to install it. It's actually very easy to install. Something that's really cool about this trigger, and I don't know if you can see it or not, is that the whole trigger is bead blasted. It's got a satin finish, except for the spot that would actually be inside the grip frame, where if you look at it, you should be able to see how it's shiny. He actually hand buffers these because he knows that this is going to rub up against the frame, and if it's pitted like this, or it's that satin finish or bead blasted finish or dust finish, it's going to scratch a little bit more than if it's smooth. So actually, when he makes these triggers, he actually takes it and buffers the back part of this trigger here to make it that much faster. So let's go ahead and start installing this into the NXT shocker, and then what we'll do is we'll take it out, we'll shoot it in semi-auto, and see how fast it shoots. Okay, now what I'm going to do here is show you the couple steps that you need to do to install the critical trigger into the NXT shocker. First thing you want to do is remove your regulator, make sure there's no air pressure in your gun. Second thing you want to do is go ahead and remove your grips. Okay, now you're going to have to move the board out of the way in order to get to the cage. So what you want to do is go ahead and remove the 2 screws holding the board in place. And then what you want to do is remove your trigger pin. Okay, your trigger will fall out. Set your stock NXT trigger aside. And then what you want to do is with your Allen key, you want to loosen up this screw and pull your frame away. Okay. Now what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to look down inside your gun, and in the back of the NXT trigger there's a little cage for the that's your trigger stop and everything. So you have to look down inside of your gun, and you'll see there's a little cage in there, and there's a little Allen key holding the cage in place. Or some people may call that a trigger stop back plate. It's up to you, whatever you want to call it, but basically serves the same function. Now what you do is go ahead and you take your Allen key and you stick it down inside there and unscrew the screw. Now the reason why you want to remove this is because you have to glue a magnet to that cage, and trying to glue the magnet to this cage without having it out of the gun is a nightmare. Take yourself a pair of needle nose pliers, reach it down inside there, and you should be able to lift it out. Out it comes. So this is the cage that you're going to glue the magnet to of the critical trigger. Okay, now when you look inside, now that you have your cage out, you have your critical trigger here and you have your super glue ready to go. You got to keep in mind that the cage goes down into the gun like this. Okay, so the magnet that comes in the kit, what you need to do is first you need to check your polarity to make sure you got your polarity right. Repel is good, okay, and that repels. Then what you do is take your super glue, put a drop on the cage, and take your magnet and drop it down inside there just like that. And now what you're going to do is you're just going to give this maybe about 5 or 10 minutes to dry, and we're going to insert it back into the gun and install it in the shocker. Now what we're going to do is we're going to grab the cage with a pair of needle nose pliers, and we're going to stick it down into the gun. Okay, so that's down into the gun, and now what we're going to do is take the screw holding the cage in place, and I'm going to have to kind of tilt this away from the camera for a second because I don't want the screw to fall out of my hands. Okay, all right. So there we go. So we have the cage down in the place where it should be, and we have the screw down there locking it in place. So now what we'll do is we will line our board up. And what's kind of cool about doing this video right now is that John Paul Fortunati is actually on vacation, and nothing's better than coming back from vacation with 1 million people asking you questions about your products. So we're going to make his day by putting this video up early. I think he comes back September 6th, and we're just going to go ahead and put this up early and let him come back to California and have a heart attack. Now, obviously with NXT shockers, or any shocker for that matter, or even the Nerve, you have to be extremely careful when you're putting your trigger frame back on, because you will pinch wires, and you will break wires, and you will break your solenoid, and you will break your on-off button, and you will bend the little piece of metal and everything. So, okay, now that we made sure that our wires are out of place, what we're going to do next is put on the screws. Yeah, you got to be really careful with these NXT shockers when you're putting on these, when you're putting the frame back together. I mean, you pinch all that spaghetti, that connects the upper board to the lower board, and it's just not going to be a good day. It's pretty cool about the shockers is they really give you a lot of ways to break it. That's what I like about it. If you don't break it by pinching the wires, you can break it by putting screws into the upper board. So there's really no shortage of ways of breaking a shocker. A lot of people have definitely found that out, that there's no shortage of ways of breaking a shocker. All right, so we got the board in place. We got the 2 screws in place. Now what we're going to do is simply install the trigger. Trigger comes in through the bottom. Okay, once you got the hole lined up, drop the screw in. Boom, there we go. Okay, now what we got here is we've got a couple, we've got at the bottom of the trigger is the magnet tension. The top of the trigger is the pre-travel. The top hole right here, I believe, is the post-travel, and the middle hole is the activation point. So I usually like to set my triggers with a little bit of play, and the activation point towards the back of the trigger pull as to not damage the micro switch. So got that trigger already set up pretty well. Like I said, I had this installed in my gun. I took it out just for the video. And now what we're going to do is we're going to put the battery back in. Now, this is a hyperdrive board in this. As you guys saw probably about a month and a half ago, I showed you a video on how to install the Hypersports or the hyperdrive board. And I always put a little O-ring inside there to prevent my battery from wiggling around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my gun back together again, and we're going to go outside and shoot the shocker in semi-auto with the critical trigger and see how it does. Shoot a little semi-auto with the critical trigger in the hyperdrive board in the shocker. Now we're shooting some China ball. China ball and the shocker do not get along at all, but hopefully you can see that the critical trigger does give you a little bit more of an increase of a rate of fire over the stock shocker trigger. So I'll show you, this gun is not in ramping. Okay. It's not in ramping, it's just semi-auto. So we got about 150 balls in here, so we'll shoot a little. There you go. Pretty quick. Pretty quick for semi. I just saw. It's not exactly 50 balls per second, and I'm not exactly super fast on semi-auto. I play PSP, but you can see that's pretty fast. Okay, that's pretty fast for a shocker. That's definitely a lot faster than you can get a shocker going with the stock trigger. So that's a very, very worthwhile upgrade for somebody who only plays semi-auto. So. Critical trigger, like I said, I can't say enough good things about John Paul Fortunato and his critical paintball. They consistently make some of the best triggers that are on the market. And when a gun comes out, and especially like some of the new ones like the SLG and the Proto Rail, with a horrible trigger like that. I never thought a company would try to tie smart parts in terms of having horrible triggers, but it seems that the PMR and the SLG really tried to go after that category as the worst trigger in paintball. But you get the critical trigger for the for the PMR, the SLG, it really wakes the gun up. You get the critical trigger for the for the shocker, and it's going to really wake the gun up. He's got great technical support. You give him a call, you can talk to him personally. He'll walk you through if you have any questions on the installation. So I'm going to put the link up at the end of this video, and definitely give Critical Paintball a shot at earning your business. They make great products. Their triggers are phenomenal, and John Paul's a great guy. He plays paintball in NPPL Division II, and he kicks ass in it. So thanks for tuning in.